As of today, Spain is spread over 195,000 square miles, making it the fourth largest country in Europe. It shares borders with Portugal to the west and France and Andorra to the north. In addition, the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean and the Canary Islands in the Atlantic are also under Spain's control. However, Spain controlled an area of 5 million square miles at the beginning of the 19th century, stretching from North America to South America, as far as Argentina. Not just that, but across the Pacific Ocean. Spain also controlled the Philippines in East Asia. The question arises, how did such a small country build such a vast empire? And then what happened that within just a few years, the fastest growing superpower in the world collapsed, leaving only one country behind? This is the story of a nation that became the world's first superpower at an astonishing speed, and then experienced its downfall just as quickly. Let's take it back to the 8th century when Spain was under Muslim rule and was known as Al-Andalus. The Muslims ruled Spain for almost 800 years. During this time, Spain made great strides in science, philosophy, and architecture. But the Muslim empire constantly faced resistance from Christians, which is known as the Reconquista. The Reconquista refers to the battles fought by Christian empires over several centuries to push the Muslims out of Spain. By the end of the 15th century, Christians had regained control over 90% of Spain, with Muslim control limited to just Granada. In the 15th century, Spain was divided into 3 Christian and 1 Islamic kingdom. To consolidate Christian control and finally expel Muslims from Spain, Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon married in 1469. Together, in 1492, they defeated the Muslim armies in the Battle of Granada, taking complete control over Spain. With full control in hand, the Christian kingdoms of Spain now had the opportunity to explore the rest of the world and establish new international trade routes. Spain's neighboring Portuguese Empire had already discovered the Atlantic Ocean, opening up trade routes to South Asia and East Asia, breaking the Ottoman Empire's monopoly on trade in the process. In 1480, Italian explorer Christopher Columbus proposed an idea to the Spanish Empire. If the world was round, then it would be possible to reach Asia by traveling westward instead of around Africa. At that time, no one knew what lay beyond the Atlantic Ocean. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand liked Columbus's idea, as they wanted Spain to establish trade routes similar to the Portuguese Empire. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain's city of Palos de la Frontera with 3 small ships, and after 2 months he reached an island. Believing he had reached Asia, he named it San Salvador, and after exploring the Bahamas, northern Cuba, and Hispaniola, he returned to Spain in 1493 to report his discoveries to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. In 1493, Columbus set out again with 17 ships, exploring nearby islands and meeting with local populations. By 1496, he returned to Spain, and in 1498 he made his 3rd trip, discovering Trinidad, Venezuela, and the northern part of South America. Columbus still believed he was discovering islands off the coast of Asia, but during his 3rd journey, he realized that he had discovered an entirely unknown continent. His final journey took place in 1502, when he discovered Central American countries like Panama, Jamaica, Honduras, and Nicaragua. However, he fell seriously ill during the journey and had to return to Spain, where he passed away in 1506. Although Columbus never discovered a shorter route to Asia, his discovery of the New World had a profound impact on the entire world and set the stage for Spain's rise as a global power. This discovery created tension between Spain and Portugal over who would control the newly discovered land. To settle the issue, the 2 empires signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the world outside of Europe into 2 zones of influence. The yellow area went under Spanish control, while the space in between went to Portugal. This is why Brazil, despite being in South America, was part of the Portuguese Empire. Today, it is the only country in South America where Portuguese is spoken. After the Treaty of Tordesillas, the Spanish Empire began establishing permanent settlements in the New World. The first city, Santo Domingo, was founded on the island of Hispaniola. By 1515, Spaniards were settled on the other nearby islands, and Cuba became the headquarters of the Spanish Empire in the region. At the same time, exploration continued in the Americas. Spanish explorers reached the Yucatan Peninsula and heard reports of a powerful and rich civilization in the western part of the continent. In 1518, Hernán Cortés, an explorer, arrived on the coast of Mexico, where the Aztec Empire ruled. After 2 years of intense fighting, he captured the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, in 1520, which later became Mexico City. However, diseases brought by the Spanish to the local population, who had no immunity, caused massive deaths among the indigenous people. This made it much easier for the Spanish to conquer the cities. By the 1530s, the Spanish Empire had controlled most of South America, including Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The diseases brought by the Spaniards played a major role in their conquest, as many local populations died from diseases like smallpox, leaving few to resist the invaders. By the late 1530s, the Spanish had expanded their control across the vast areas of South America, but North America, which we now know as the USA and Canada, was still unexplored. It wasn't until 1540 that Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto reached Florida, Georgia, and Texas, but the Spanish Empire did not establish colonies in these regions. Across the Pacific Ocean, Spanish explorer Ferdinand Magellan discovered the islands that are now known as the Philippines. By the 1570s, the Spanish had established full control over the Philippines, marking their entry into East Asian geopolitics. As the 16th century progressed and the Spanish Empire expanded, they increasingly required resources and wealth. They aggressively searched for resources in South America, discovering gold and silver mines in places like Mexico, Bolivia, and Peru. By the end of the 16th century, Spain was receiving so much gold and silver from South America that it had no place to store it. The Spanish controlled 80% of the world's gold and silver supply, but the resources in South America began to run out. Additionally, the arrival of the Spanish led to a hybrid society in the colonies, with mestizos, mixed European and indigenous people, criollos, European descent born in the Americas, and peninsulares, Spaniards born in Spain, all vying for control. Tensions between these groups began to rise in the 17th century. Externally, the Spanish Empire also faced threats. In North America, the British and French explorers began establishing colonies, and they sought to take control of the Caribbean islands from the Spanish. Wars between the Spanish and British over these islands were common from 1560 to 1660. By the end of the century, Spain's hold on California, Texas, and cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco had become firm. In 1808, the Spanish Empire was dealt a devastating blow when Napoleon invaded Spain and took control of the country. This allowed the local populations in South America to see an opportunity for independence. Between 1808 and 1810, wars of independence erupted across the Americas, with Argentina declaring independence in 1816, Chile in 1818, and Colombia in 1819. Mexico followed soon after in 1821, and Peru declared independence in 1824. Within just 8 years, the 400-year-old Spanish Empire had collapsed. By the end of the 19th century, the Spanish Empire controlled only Cuba, Puerto Rico, a few Caribbean islands, and the Philippines. In 1895, Cuba began its War of Independence, involving the United States, and after 3 years, Spain finally conceded. Thus, the mighty Spanish Empire, which had ruled half the world for 4 centuries and controlled 80% of the world's gold supply, had collapsed, leaving only the small island we now call Spain. Even though the Spanish Empire collapsed politically, its cultural and linguistic impact remained incredibly strong across the world. Today, Spanish is one of the most widely spoken languages globally, with hundreds of millions of speakers across Latin America, Europe, and parts of the United States. The systems of governance, religion, and social structures introduced by Spain continued to shape these regions long after independence. Catholicism, brought by Spanish missionaries, became the dominant religion in most of Latin America, influencing traditions, festivals, and daily life. Economically, however, many of the former colonies struggled after independence. The Spanish Empire had structured these regions mainly for resource extraction rather than sustainable development. Once the centralized control disappeared, many newly independent countries faced political instability, weak institutions, and economic challenges. This period marked the beginning of long-term struggles for stability in several Latin American nations. Meanwhile, Spain itself entered a period of decline and internal challenges. After losing most of its overseas territories, Spain was no longer a dominant global power. The country faced economic stagnation, political conflicts, and civil unrest throughout the 19th century, while other European nations like Britain and France continued expanding their empires and industrializing rapidly. Spain lagged behind in industrial development. Looking back, the rise and fall of the Spanish Empire is one of the most dramatic stories in world history. In just a few decades, Spain transformed from a collection of divided kingdoms into the most powerful empire on Earth. Its expansion reshaped global trade, connected continents, and initiated what we now call globalization. However, the same factors that fueled its rise also contributed to its decline. Over-reliance on gold and silver weakened its economy. Constant wars drained its resources, and internal divisions made governance difficult. Additionally, the rise of other European powers created intense competition that Spain struggled to keep up with. The story of Spain teaches an important lesson. Rapid growth without sustainable systems can lead to equally rapid decline. Empires built on extraction, conquest, and short-term gains often face instability in the long run. So this was the story of how Spain became the world's first superpower, and how it lost everything just as quickly. From ruling vast continents to shrinking back into a single nation, Spain's journey is both fascinating and cautionary. If you found this story interesting, imagine how many other empires in history followed a similar path, rising to unimaginable heights and then collapsing under their own weight. Let me know in the comments which empire you want to explore next. Maybe the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, or even the Roman Empire. Stay curious because history always has more stories to tell.